You've entered Bookstorm with Kristen Civiletto and me, Chris Storm. This is a podcast devoted to best-selling books that matter, books that make a difference. We're diving down deep with beloved authors about their stories. We're exposing hot-button topics and heartfelt themes, the issues that affect each of us in our own lives, as siblings, parents, partners, friends, as human beings. We're braving new ideas, fresh thoughts, hard lessons, and important truths. Those kinds of things that stay with us long after we turn the last page and close the book. Welcome back, Bookstorm followers, book lovers, and book readers all over the globe, 58 countries, almost all 50 states and 970 or 980 cities. I've lost count. We're super grateful for all of you. We're listening when you write into us, asking for specific authors. You know, as well as we do, that Bookstorm talks about books that matter, books that inspire, books that change lives. And we have an author and a book here with us today that you are going to love. Welcome, Nikki Erlick and her novel, The Measure.
Thank you so much for having me. That's an incredibly impressive audience listening. Wow.
We're super excited to have you with your debut novel, I may add. And I want to give our listeners a little bit about your bio because it's very incredible, everything that you've accomplished since 2022 with this novel. The Measure was an instant New York Times bestseller. It's been translated or translating into 20 languages. It was selected as a Jenna Bush Hager Read with Jenna book club pick. Bookstorm and Jenna often pick the same books, and Jenna, we agree with you on this one. It is a must read. It was a Barnes & Noble Discover pick. It had accolades, endorsements, and recommendations from the Today Show, New York Times, Washington Post, New York Times Book Review, Oprah, Amazon, Library Reads, Marie Claire, and I could go on, but we want to hear our author talk. Let me tell you a little more about her because very impressive. Your work has also appeared in New York Magazine, Newsweek, Huffington Post, Literary Hub. You are a travel writer. You've explored nearly a dozen countries on assignment. That is a dream job. From rural villages in France to Arctic fjords in Norway. Wow. As a ghostwriter, you've written for CEOs, entrepreneurs, and academics. Nikki has graduated from Harvard, summa cum laude, but of course, after reading this book, and also a master's in global thought from Columbia. Quite impressive, I'm sure, hard-earned, well-deserved accomplishment with The Measure. Thank you for joining us today.
Thank you so much for having me. It's really an honor to be here and to talk about this book.
Wonderful. Well, Nikki, we're here, of course, to talk about The Measure. And I like to give our listeners kind of a short summary of the book, and I don't give away spoilers. And here I thought it was best to kind of keep it very brief because it's such a great concept. And I think that's where we can kind of dive in from there. But The Measure follows the lives of 8 ordinary people. They wake up one day, there's a box outside of their front door, and inside is something that suggests possibly the number of years that they might live. And every adult on the earth got the exact same box. Now, suddenly everyone is faced with some of the same questions. Do they want to know how long they will live? They're thinking about longevity versus the quality of their life. But what they do with this knowledge is really the basis for this incredible novel. Did you want to add anything? Because I know there's so much we could go into, but in terms of the facts and the story.
No, I think that was a perfect summary. But I like to add sometimes that because it's such this big topic, this thing that hits the whole globe all at once, the book explores it through 8 different characters' perspectives. And so I tried to really get into the minds of different people who all have different reactions, and we see how their stories overlap over the course of the book as well.
I love it. Your book has such a depth. And of course, we're going to explore that, but your characters do too. It's one of the fantastic things about
Thank
this
you.
novel. So if you're ready, we'll brave the storm. And I think Chris is going to kick us off.
I'll tell you, I have to say for our listeners, it's a novel overflowing with wisdom, the strength and frailty of human nature, and some good old common sense. We as readers naturally relate to every story as it fits into our own lives, even fiction. And the question that rose most strongest in my mind as a reader is, how do people react to something they don't understand? They get this box in the mail, it's got a string, and the string, for a long time, they can't figure out what the string means. And then when they do understand the meaning behind the box, they don't know what to do with it. The thought that struck me is, do we have to understand everything in order to accept it? Can we coexist with something? What were you, as the writer of this thought-provoking, beautiful novel, attempting to say about humankind? I saw such a people being so upset and disgruntled and aggravated because they could not be all-knowing. What is it about humankind that we have to know everything and understand everything?
Yes, these were definitely questions and emotions that I personally have struggled with and was struggling with when writing the book. I'm someone who I've dealt with anxiety for many years. I struggle when I feel like I don't have everything in control. And certainly I was writing a lot of this book during the pandemic, a time when everything felt entirely out of all of our control. And I felt quite helpless to do anything about all the tragedy that was unfolding. And for me, part of just the human experience is learning to accept those things we don't understand, learning to accept those things we can't control, struggling with questions like, why do bad things happen to good people? Why do people have different fates? Some people in this book are given a very long string, a very long life, and some people are given a very short string and a very short life. And there is no rhyme or reason to why that happens. And they're very difficult things to accept in life, that we don't get to know the why. We don't get to know why things happen the way they do. But we have to somehow accept them in order to move forward. And so this book was partially my way of grappling with those thoughts myself, and of coming to the conclusion that a lot of times there are no conclusions, and living in that uncertainty, of living in that space where the lack of answers and lack of control is what life is. It's what the characters have to deal with, because it's what we as readers and what myself as the writer have to deal with, even when it's very uncomfortable.
Yeah, it was really very brilliant the way every single person in the world received the same box, and how people reacted so extremely different. In fact, it's not a spoiler, I don't think, to say some people refused to open it.
Yes.
Some people wanted to destroy it. So it was very intriguing to me that some people didn't want to know, don't want to see the truth about things in their lives, or would rather just suppress those thoughts. Thank you for tying that into COVID too, because that's something we can all relate to. We all suffered with some harsh truths and realities during COVID.
Mm-hmm, absolutely. And, for me, you mentioned in my bio that I was a travel writer. So that's what I have been doing up until the pandemic hit. And then, of course, within days, I was out of a job. A lot of my colleagues and I were laid off, along with hundreds of thousands of other people who found themselves unemployed, during those early weeks. And so it was really a time of a total lack of control in my life, where I felt I had never been, out of work before. I was thrown back into quarantine, moving back in with my family, just a total feeling of the rug being pulled out from under me. And so then writing this book became kind of the way that I kept grounded, and the one thing that I did feel like I had control over in my life.
Mm-hmm. So very, very thank you for sharing that.
Now, there's so many themes that we could explore in your story, and it's hard to narrow it down to a few, but this was one that really caught my interest, and Chris kind of alluded to it. I want to talk a little bit about disinformation. In your story, as Chris was talking about, as you've mentioned, there was a lot of confusion about what the boxes meant. people were offering their theories and conjectures. In fact, some wild theories were floating around. But given, social media and the state of our culture, I was wondering if you thought we were even more susceptible to disinformation, to hoaxes, or even manipulation.
Absolutely. When I first started writing those very early scenes, when the boxes arrive and nobody yet knows what they mean, I thought the very first character that we see who encounters this box, the first thing that they would do would be pick up their phone and open up Facebook and Twitter and turn to social media to see what people are talking about and if anyone has answers there. And later on then in the book, when people are trying to explore and share theories and investigate, the characters end up on Reddit or other blogs where all of these discussions are happening. And so absolutely the conversation is playing out on social media. But as you said, I do think there's so much danger now on all of these forums of either just getting the wrong information because someone is uninformed and they're not necessarily maliciously spreading disinformation, but they're just tweeting out something that is not accurate. Or of course, people are being purposeful about spreading lies and false rumors and trying to manipulate people. And there is a lot of manipulation that happens in the book. There's a lot of fear mongering, a lot of prejudice and sort of divisiveness that comes out of the boxes arriving. And so that's all playing out online too. And I tried to explore that a bit in the book, that the political side, the sort of the ramifications for society of these boxes arriving is playing out in these these rumors and these threats and these divisions that are really just spiraling online. And we certainly see that nowadays. And I think I was thinking back to a decade ago when I first got social media, and I never would have come up upon a headline and thought, is this true or false? And nowadays, the first thing I think when I see a somewhat controversial or scandalous headline is this even real? And that really, I don't think was the case 10 years ago.
That is such a great point, because it's almost like a realization that there are people who want to foment dissension, chaos, confusion, even about cultural things, because there's an angle where they benefit somehow. And that's
Absolutely.
a scary thought.
Yes,
Yeah.
very scary.
You said something, by the way, that just was kind of laughing in my mind. Not so long ago, we had an earthquake in my area here. And the first thing I did, not go check on everyone in the house. I went on social media to see, did anyone else feel that? And what was it? It wasn't like, that serious that I was worried someone was hurt. So I'm going to defend myself a little. But yes, you were exactly right. Very interesting.
Yeah, the first thing you do is pick up the phone, I think, more so than turn on the TV or the radio.
It's an enormous amount of information and connection that we never had before between thousands of people instantly. The only good thing that come out of there is that there's not a lot of secret things going on. We hear about something instantly, more so than we did when we simply had a news channel. But now
Yes.
The greater danger is, as you said, Nikki, what's real and what's fake. This struck me so strong. I can't stop thinking about the book. I thought about this book a long time after I read it. What was delivered in that box is something we already know. We deal with it every day. When am I going to die? How much time do I have? The difference in the box was it told you how much time you have. But the truth is, we face this every single day. I'm getting older. It crosses my mind more often than it ever has before. But isn't it interesting that in our daily lives, we really suppress it and we ignore it? We don't get up every day wondering all day long, is this going to be the day? Is this going to be the day?
Right.
But
right.
It is with us. So what you did was you forced humanity to look at their finiteness. We go through, I have this theory that we go through every day as if we're going to be here forever. We get angry about the most ridiculous things. We hold grudges. We worry about nonsensical things, 90% of which never even happen. But when you're faced with your absolute finite, you look at things differently. So here's my question as I'm ranting here, because I'm kind of excited about it. You showed the reader that even when things are out of our control, like our death, our hour, sickness, whatever may happen to us, tragedy, accident, we still have something in our control. Our reaction, our perception, how we choose to deal with it. Do we accept it? Do we ignore it? The list goes on and on and on. In that way, do you believe, or were you attempting to reveal in any way that sometimes mankind is quite often the cause of our own problems?
Yes, it's a big question, lots of aspects. I think I want to touch on what you were first talking about, how this is always there. The concept of our mortality is always present, but it's just not usually at the very forefront of our minds. And I think even there's a character who mentions that we always have these, these songs, these aphorisms that are, live each day like it's your last, live like you're dying. But that's really a lot to ask of people to do on a daily basis. I certainly don't believe that I live that mindfully and meaningfully every hour of every day. That's quite difficult. But that the presence of these boxes for the people who, even if they don't choose to open them and look at the string, but they just keep that box somewhere in their house, which I think is honestly how I would behave. I might not open the box, but I would keep it somewhere in my house. It's just that visual, physical reminder every day of there is an end point, and maybe I will do things a little differently today because of thinking about that. But for me, I wanted to have this balance in the book between the fact that, yes, there is something that's very, very out of their control. These strings arrive and people can't change when the end of their string is. That's, it's preordained in this book and that's out of their control. But they do have control over every single thing that happens for every minute up until that string ends. And that, as you said, they choose how they're reacting, they choose how they're behaving, how they're treating other people. And really the main conflict in this book comes from mankind being its own, worst enemy, and the fact that they create these problems by the way that they react to these strings coming. And as I kind of alluded to earlier, a lot of the conflicts come because these strings are a new way of dividing people and seeing that half of us have shorter strings, half of us have longer strings. Let's revert to our, tribalistic us versus them thinking that we have always had throughout history, that we certainly have a lot right now in a time when there's so much divisiveness, so much hate speech, hate crimes. And so a lot of the conflict in the book is really just humans reacting the way that they always have and creating all of these terrible issues that really don't need to exist if they had just behaved a little bit differently.
You showed us something else very wise in here, that this is a weakness of humanity. We love to formulate groups.
Yes.
What group are we going to be in? It's my high school team. It's my college. I'm from this state. I am this nationality. I am this political party. Whatever it is, I don't know why we love to get in a group. Maybe there is a safety mechanism or a strength that we derive. But even this, the long stringers were mad at the short stringer, or the short stringers were separated from the long stringers in the book. And it got to be another whole minority group that was persecuted. And it you know what it did, Nikki? It showed us how ridiculous our prejudices are against each other in these little self-made formulated groups, how ridiculous it is and how unfair it is. Were you attempting to show that as well? Or was that just came out of the story itself, naturally, organically?
It really just came out of the story itself as I was writing. I certainly didn't sit down and say, I want to write a very political book or a book making these statements about society. It just, as I was writing the story, it felt like the most authentic, realistic way to portray what would happen in today's world if these strings did arrive. And I wanted to show, the dual sides of this kind of grouping, because there are benefits to this too, that when the strings arrive, a lot of the book takes place in a support group among people who receive short strings. And so they form this new community and these new bonds of strength and love and helping each other that they wouldn't have had before, that this, this grouping of where people with short strings becomes a real source of comfort and solace for them. But when it's coupled with something like fear or like prejudice, then that's when all of the bad things happen as well, because the long strings become fearful of the short stringers, and they start profiling them and wanting to discriminate against them and exclude them. And for all of those aspects of the book, I was drawing on, very real things that have happened in history. I didn't make any of that up. The military bans, the just the general profiling, all of that's all happened. And so I wanted to show that it was both of these sides, the sort of strength of these new communities that form, and then also the very unfair divisions and prejudice that unfortunately came along with it.
Mm-hmm. I love that. Thank you.
Nikki, I wanted to ask you a little bit about this idea of longevity versus the quality of life. And I was wondering if you were kind of thinking about that, of course, as you were writing, because our society, at least maybe in Western society, we're very obsessed with this idea of living longer and looking younger.
Yes.
And a lot of focus is not put on the idea of the quality of our life and the time we've been given. And I was wondering if you could just comment on that a little bit, what you were thinking.
Yes, it's definitely something that came up more and more as I was writing, and the fact that we focus so much on wanting as many years as possible, and of course there's value in that. The people that I have lost in my life, I would give anything for more time with them, but there are trade-offs, and we do have to realize that. I think most people who have reached the end of their life would probably look back on it and think more about the content of the life, the quality of the life, as opposed to just the sheer amount of years in numbers that they were given. And I wanted the book to really be a testament to all the people that I've known, the people that we've all known, who did not receive as many years as they should have, who did receive shorter strings, but still had such a huge impact on the people around them, left such a huge legacy. And the fact that purposefully in the book, hopefully this isn't a spoiler, it's a lot of the characters with the shorter strings are the ones who are kind of creating the greatest ripple effects in their lives and leaving kind of the greatest footprint behind on the world, because it's not the length of time does not equate with sort of the meaning and purpose and value of that time.
Yeah, and you have a unique perspective too, because of you being a travel writer and the traveling that you've done. That is something that, traditionally we look to as part of that quality of life analysis.
Yes.
The experiences you've had. So that I thought was particularly interesting.
Yes, I'm so fortunate that I had that experience for those years to be able to travel and see countries that I might not have been able to get to on my own. And certainly some of my travels ended up making their way into this book as well, in a few scenes. And so I'm really grateful that I got to have those experiences.
That is a dream job, that travel job. When I read that, I thought, but then this is a dream job too. Instant New York Times bestseller. You went from one good thing to another. Let me say to our listeners, I don't know, can I give a takeaway? Here's my takeaway.
Sure.
We need to get a little more urgency with the time we have left. Use it in really good, important ways.
Mm-hmm.
Let go of this unforgiveness and the drama and all the nonsense, and really use the time that we have. This is the beautiful takeaway. My takeaway was this one sentence: the meaning of life is greater than the number of our days. I just hit so strong. I have a feeling a lot of people are going to read this and get their own different takeaway, depending on where they are in life and maybe what they're dealing with. And that is the beauty of a book like this, that you're speaking to a lot of different people. These 8 people in the story that you call out are so different, and you're showing us how they react. Every one of us is going to relate to one of those 8 and maybe be able to interpret this measure in our own different way. Really loved it. Thank you so much. Meaningful book, life-changing book, a book that matters. And so we've got to ask you, because we're dying to know, what are you going to do next? What's on your radar?
Hopefully another book. As you mentioned, this is the dream job. At least for me, this has always been my dream. I was a reader since I, was very, very young. I grew up in a family of readers. And so it's always just in my dream to write a novel. This has truly been a dream come true. And I hope that the readers will allow me to write another one, and that they will, hopefully embrace it the way that they did this book. It's been, it's been an incredible honor this past year, just getting to hear from all of these readers and share this story with everyone.
Mm-hmm. It's a wonderful gift, and thank you for sharing it. And so listeners, you're going to want to connect with Nikki Erlick. You can find her on her website, nikkierlick.com. You can find her on Facebook and on Instagram. It's been a lot of fun, deep dive with you here today, Nikki, and we hope to see you again.
Thank you so much for having me. Thank you for the really thoughtful questions. It's been great.
Absolutely. Bye-bye.
I mean, what a thought-provoking book. What a deep thinking book. I think wherever you are in life, you may take something different out of it. It reminded me of this, at least this happens in my family. We go to a funeral, we come out of the funeral, and we're all changed temporarily. Life is short. I've got to embrace it. I got to do something important. I have to stop wasting my time. I have to love people more. And it lasts for a little while. And then life gets in the way and it sort of dwindles, and we get back to the everyday worries of nonsense and ridiculous things and busyness, the busyness of life. It was a little bit of a wake-up call. How did you feel it? How did it fit into your world?
Yeah, and what you said was interesting, because the bottom line is we still have to work and support ourselves and put food on the table. And so it's hard to be focused just on quality of life when you're also trying to balance necessary things, because you need shelter and food and other things. But what I thought was really interesting was in the story, you saw people were traveling more, forgiving, some maybe taking revenge, some taking risks they wouldn't have otherwise taken. And what I was thinking is, do you really ever need an excuse to do those things? Like, what's stopping you? You can forgive and you can love more, you can travel more, assuming you can afford it. But there's things that we could do, not when we have this pressing and urgent situation. So I wanted to ask you, what do you think is so different about having a pressing situation that you start acting in this way? Like, for example, not to be negative, but a terminal diagnosis.
Mm-hmm. Because it's exactly what you just said. We think we have plenty of time left. I'll do it later. I'm going to be mad for a little bit. I'll forgive later. Yeah, I want to travel to Africa. I got plenty of time to do that. Yes, you're right. You've got to have a job. You can't just go Rocky Mountain climbing and skydiving and parachute from an airplane all day long. We do have to live in the real world. Even in the real world, there's things we could be doing right now differently if we knew tomorrow was our last day. I think of this sometimes where you don't hear of it often, thank goodness, but through my life, I've known people who know people who've gotten on an airplane, the airplane has crashed. And it always hit me so oddly. I would think they got up, they got a shower, they got dressed, they ate their breakfast, they thought it was a normal day. They got on the plane, they asked for a coffee, they read a book, they thought it was a normal day. Plane was getting ready to land, still thought it was normal. All of a sudden it's not, life is over. And you can't help but think, what would you have done different in those last 24 hours? What's the answer? Do it now. Do it now.
Yeah, and you raise a really good point. Certain things, Rocky Mountain climbing costs money, but there's things that don't cost money. And that is investing, loving deeply, forgiving, maybe putting up boundaries where boundaries have been needed for a long time and you haven't had that pressing need to actually go in that direction. I think those are the things to me that often give us a lot of meaning in our life. They're the quality issues that we always talk about, and those things are free.
Mm-hmm. I believe this. I've said it a million times. The meaning of life is relationships. I believe it's relationships. So when it gets down to it, I don't think we're even going to care that we didn't ever get to do the deep sea dive. We're going to care more that we got to call somebody that we loved and talk to them and tell them that we love them. That's it. Like, who do we love and who loved us? I think on our deathbed, we're going to be, who did we love and who loved us? What's the real meaning of it all? Yes, I don't want to minimize great causes and in important purposes, because life is full of so much turmoil and hurt and problems and things that we do have to address a bigger picture than just our own center of our universe. Yes, we do. But what is the most important? I don't have an answer for all of you. You're going to have to read this book and decide it all on your own, but it really makes you think. It really does.
Well, and go ahead. I'm sorry.
I was going to say, anything else pop up to you?
Yeah. First of all, something you said was really interesting because, you know, we want to love those in our orbit. But when you take a very big picture view of humanity, that's also how we love people and love humankind, is by engaging in certain things or taking certain actions with our lives. So I love that there's that individual perspective, but you're right. We have to also live with kind of that bigger perspective, and that is a love for humanity. And this book, that was something also that struck me. There were a lot of people who focused on the things that divided them. And when we focus on the things that unite us, we're all human beings on this planet. We're all dealing with phenomena we don't understand. That gives you a very different perspective, because now you can live with people with more understanding, have more grace. And I don't know, that was something that really leapt out. Would you want to know, by the way, what your measure of days would be?
Absolutely not. I do not want to know. I thought about that. I thought I'd be the person who did not open the box. What good is it going to do? What do you get? So it brings me back to my second question to her. We already know we're all leaving here sooner or later, some sooner than later. This isn't a big news flash, people. We're finite. It's ending. You know, where are we going after this? This brings up a whole God issue. Do you believe in God? Do you believe in heaven? I do. So this came up in the book too, which was interesting. People got very angry with God. They were angry with their healthcare providers. They wanted better answers. They were angry with life in general. It didn't turn out the way it could for their limited time here on this earth. But I thought, just because something doesn't fit into our box doesn't mean that it's not real or that it's not meaningful. We can't always explain things. Like Nikki said in the beginning, why do some people get sick? Why do some people die early? There's things we don't have answers to. We just simply don't. Why is it? Because maybe we don't see the whole eternal picture. Maybe we are finite beings. We're not infinite beings. Our mind, we're super intellectual, but we're not eternally intelligent. There's some things we're never going to understand. It doesn't mean we can't accept them. But on the flip side, I like what you said. Instead of being angry with everything, the universe, God, whatever you want to call it, I liked what you brought up, that maybe people love each other more. Maybe they band together more. Maybe they realize all this other stuff doesn't matter. Let's put aside our differences and see something good in each other. I like how you brought that up. Maybe this is a time where we do stand up for righteousness and fight against evil. Maybe we do support minorities more and stop picking at our differences. I really liked that you focused on the good. So I think if you open the box, you'd be one of those good people that go around spreading peace and joy.
First of all, I would not open the box like you. And second of all, something you said a while back to me really has stuck with me. And I was thinking about that as you were just talking. And it is this idea that people put that eternal perspective or even God in the box that they believe it should be in. And, you know, there's a lot of metaphorical applications of this book to various things. And I think I agree with you that people are going to read it. And depending on where they are, they're going to think about that present and eternal standpoint.
And, you know, I have a theory too. I have another theory that sometimes, you know, it's a butterfly effect. What we do passes to our children. We've discussed this with different authors, either purposefully or subconsciously. Then it goes to their children, then their children, then their children. A myriad of habits, beliefs, customs, traditions, even things we don't want to pass, we are passing. So sometimes I say, you don't see the full effect of something, or you may not know the reason why for 10 years or 50 or 100 or 200 or 500 or 1,000 years later. multi-generations later, we see the effects of what we've done. So we are finite and we're not going to know it all, but hopefully we leave some kind of good legacy behind.
Yeah.
Lots to think about.
Yeah, I'm okay with that. I'm okay with not knowing everything. I do believe, like you, that eventually we will know. But for now, I'm okay not knowing.
Me too. I don't want to know. Absolutely not. Well, anyway, so you've got to pick up this book by Nikki Erlick. Take a look at it, read it in your own time, in your own space, with your own beliefs, fit them into your own thought process, and see if you can pick something good and lasting out of there, a little treasure, a little nugget to take with you along the way. In the meantime, shout out, you know who. We talked to him this morning as we got started. We had a glitch. He's on the sidelines all the time. The Mr. Mark Carey, producer, sound engineer extraordinaire. And we have a lineup. Let me go through it. We got to pique your interest, get you reading, get you excited. Madeline Martin, The Keeper of Hidden Books. Bryn Turnbull, Paris Deception. Katie Quinn, Janie Chang, Phoenix Crown. Ellie Banks, Macy Aites, One Little Spark. Matthew Quirk, Inside Threat. Kate White, Between Two Strangers. Word on the street has it we got some more authors coming back to join us again. Tosca Lee, super excited. Can't wait.
Yeah, and Sandra Brown too, with her new thriller that's coming out, which we're very excited about. Well, listeners, we are growing every week, as Chris referenced in the beginning, and we just thank you. We are so grateful that you listen, that you're sharing our socials. We love these deep discussions. We love hearing from you. So thank you from the bottom of our hearts. And in the meanwhile, of course, just stay on the radar with us. We have our website, BOOKSTORMPODCAST.com. You can find us on Facebook, on Instagram, on Twitter, and on TikTok. And of course, YouTube. Just search Bookstorm and Podcast, and we should come right up. Until next time, listeners, one of the best ways to brave the storm is to dive down deep into life-changing fiction.